All right, today we're going to talk about consecutive integers, and we are going to talk about how to write equations so we can find what those consecutive integers are, and we're going to determine what those values are with even or odd or just regular consecutive integers. So what are consecutive integers? These are going to be integers that follow each other. For example, you could have -3, -4, and -5. They're in order. They follow one another. Another example would be like 21, 22, 23. They could be even, like 18, 20, 22. They could be odd, like 15, 17, 19. These are all examples of consecutive integers. And hopefully you have your worksheet out and you're filling these notes in. And if I ever go too fast, please know that you can pause the video and then you can catch up. Or if you need to replay something if you didn't quite understand because you were writing at the same time as trying to listen and you need to listen to it again. You can always pause the video, rewind, and watch it again. All right, so there are 3 types of consecutive integers, the way that we can represent them so we can put them into an equation to solve them. And I'm going to get rid of where it says 2, only because sometimes it's 2, sometimes it's 3, sometimes it's 4. And so I'm just going to start a list of how they would look. So if you have consecutive integers, they can be represented as the first number you can let be n. The second number would be n plus 1. The third number would be n plus 2. The next number would be n plus 3, so forth and so on. So depending on how many integers they're asking about, you may only need the n and the n plus 1. If they only want 2. If they want 3, you would use the n plus 1, and the n plus 2. All right, consecutive even integers can be represented as n for the first number, n plus 2 for the second number, n plus 4 for the third number, and so forth and so on. Depending on how many numbers you're asked to find depends on how many n plus 2, n plus 4s you'll need. All right, the next is, what about odd integers? Well, we're going to let the first number be n, and I bet you most of you guys are like, oh, I got this. It's going to be n plus 1, n plus 3, and that is incorrect. Sorry to bust your bubble there. It's going to be the same as your even integers. Why do you ask? Because even if the numbers are odd, like 1, 3, 5, 7, so forth and so on, when you go from 1 to 3, you added 2. When you went from 1 to 5, you added 4. Do you see the pattern there? So that's why we continue to use the n plus 2, n plus 4. So it's really easy. All you have to do is remember that the even and the odd are the same. All right, so let's take a look at some examples. The first one says that we're looking for 2 consecutive odd integers that have a sum of 28. So a big key word in there is that we're looking at odd integers. And so we need to let the first number be n, because we're going to look at this, where it says about odd integers, we're going to use that. And our second number is going to be n plus 2. N plus 2. So now I'm ready to write my equation because all it says is 2 numbers, so I can stop there. I got my first number and my second number. So it says I need the sum, so we're going to take the first number plus the second number. First number plus the second number, and that equals 28. My sum is 28. And so when I add my like terms, I get 2n plus 2 equals 28. We know how to solve equations after we combine like terms. We're going to move the constant to the other side. So we subtract it. 28 take away 2 is 26. Divide by 2 and you get 13. All right, so that is not my complete answer because it says to find 2 odd integers. So my first odd integer is 13. And so if I look over here, When I plug in, I got 13. And when I say 13 plus 2, I get 15. So my second number is 15. Okay? Let's get rid of that. And you can also just think, if your first number is 13, what would follow 13? That's the next odd number, and that would be 15. All right, let's take a look at number 2. Number 2 says 3 consecutive integers. They're not even or odd, so we're going to use this first method where you're just saying n plus 1, n plus 2, n plus 3. So it says here we want 3 consecutive integers whose sum is negative 66. So my first number we're going to let be n. My second number we're going to let be n plus 1. And my third number we're going to let be n plus 2. And that's because I need 3 numbers that follow one after another. And they're not even and they're not odd, so we use n plus 1, n plus 2. So sum means to add, so I'm going to add my first number plus my second number plus my third number. I don't know what they are, so we have to use some expressions until we can figure out what n is. And I do know that they add up to equal negative 66. So I'm going to combine like terms, n plus n, 3n. Combine our numbers, 1 plus 2 is 3. And now I'm ready to solve my two-step equation. We move the constant, and you get negative 69. We divide by 3, and we get n equals negative 23. So that's not my complete answer, that's only part of it. So if you take a look at your numbers that we identified at the start, that might help you determine your 3 integers. N is negative 23, we just found that. And let me get that out of the way. When I add 1 to negative 23, what is negative 23 plus 1? That's right, it's negative 22. And last but not least, the next number would be negative 23 plus 2. What's negative 23 plus 2? Negative 21. So my numbers are negative 23, negative 22, and negative 21. Again, you could have found your sequences by just asking yourself, what would follow negative 23? Okay, number 3. I'm looking for the sum of 2 consecutive even integers. That's 170. So we're going to let the first number be n. We're going to let the second number be n plus 2 because we're looking at even. So this is the second method up there at the top that we first discussed. So we're looking at even integers. And I only need 2, so I've got my first number, my second number. All right, so now I'm ready for my equation. It says the sum, so we're going to add the first number plus the second number, and that equals 170. So now you just solve the equation. N plus n, 2n. Keep your plus 2 equals 170. Move the constant. 2n equals 168. Divide by 2. N equals 84. So my first number is 84. My second number is 84 plus 2, which is 86. Again, you can just say 84. What would come after 84? 86. So those are my 2 even consecutive integers. And you can always check that to make sure they add to give you 170. And they do. Again, if you need to pause the video so you can get whatever you missed, maybe you were intently listening to me and you weren't copying these down, make sure you understand how we came up with the equations and why we let the first number, second number represent what we let it represent. All right, let's take a look at the back side of the worksheet. We're going to create an equation from the following sentences and solve. So we're going to use some translating here. That's why we practiced it last week. We got to know our adding words, subtracting words, multiplying words, and dividing words. So number 4 says the sum, which we know means to add. So we're going to take two quantities and add them together. One of the quantity is twice a number. We can call 2x. Twice means to multiply. We're going to use x as my number. And 13. So we're going to add those two quantities together because it says the sum is, we know is equals, and then 47. So now we are ready to solve the equation. We need to move the 13 over. So we're going to subtract the 13. 2x equals 47 minus 13 is 34. Divide by 2. And the number we're looking for is 17. So just like we've practiced this week, solving equations, and then of course what we did last week, translating, and we're mushing them all together now. Number 5, we are looking to find a number which is decreased by 10 is 4 times its opposite. Remember, to be decreased by 10 means to subtract 10. So we are going to take a number, I don't know what it is, so we're going to call it x. We're going to decrease that number by 10. So we're going to say x minus 10 is 4 times its opposite. So an opposite would be, if I had x, the opposite of x is negative x. If I had 4, the opposite would be negative 4. 5, negative 5, so forth and so on. So we're taking 4 times its opposite. So we want the opposite of my number we chose, which is x. So 4 times negative x. And I do not like the way that looks, so I'm going to rewrite this as negative 4x. Because we know that 4 times negative x is negative 4x. All right, variable goes to the left. Number goes to the right. So I'm going to take my 4x and I'm going to move it by adding it because it was negative. And I'm going to take my 10 and I'm going to add it because it was negative. Remember, the variable goes to the left, your number goes to the right. So I can combine and I get x plus 4x is 5x. Bring down my equal sign, and on the right hand side all I have is my 10. Divide by 5. X equals 2. And that's all you had to do there. Translate and then solve. All right, number 6. I would say this is our last one, but we are going to actually add one more to this set of problems. All right, so number 6, it says the sum of two numbers is 91. I don't know what these numbers are, so I'm going to let my first number be x. And I'm going to let my second number be whatever they're telling me. And it says right here, the larger number is 1 more than 4 times the smaller number. So I'm letting my smaller number be x. My larger number is going to be 1 more than 4 times the smaller. So 4 times my smaller number plus 1. So now what I have to do is write my equation. We know that the sum is 91. Go. Having dog problems. All right, so I'm going to add these together because it says that the sum of these numbers is 91. All right, so here we go. X plus 4x plus 1 is 91. So the sum of those numbers is 91. So I'm going to combine my like terms, and I get 5x plus 1 equals 91. Now I'm going to subtract 1, so 5x equals 90. Divide by 5, and we get 18. So we want to know what my two numbers are. My first number is 18. My second number is going to be whatever 4 times 18 is, plus 1. So 4 times 18 is 72. 72 plus 1 is 73. So those are my two numbers. So be careful. Sometimes they just want one number. Sometimes if there's multiple numbers, you're going to have to plug in to get the second one. All right, so if you need to, you can pause that to play catch up. Make sure you review that so you understand how to write an equation given a sentence. All right, the next one I'm going to add to the bottom of this because on your work that you're going to have to do for today's lesson is a Google form, and it's just a practice of consecutive integers. You're going to write the equation, you're going to solve, and then you're going to type in your answer. So you'll need to make sure that you have paper so you can write down your problems and that you can then take a picture of it and upload it with your document. All right, so here's another example. It says the greater, so copy this down, of 2 consecutive odd integers is 1 less than twice the smaller. We need to find the larger number. All right, so the key word in here is odd. So we've got consecutive odd integers. So we're going to have to flip our paper over and see what that looks like. So I only got 2 of them. We're going to let my first number be n, and we're going to let the second number, because it's odd, let it be n plus 2. All right, so it says the greater of these 2 numbers. Which one's the greater one? That would be the n plus 2. So the greater number is 1 less than twice the smaller. Remember your turnaround words? We have a turnaround word in here. So what we're going to do is we're going to have to flip-flop the 1 and the twice the number. So twice the smaller minus 1. So you had to flip-flop that. That came from last week's lesson with translating. Less than is a turnaround word. All right, so now I'm ready to solve for n. I'm going to subtract my 2n, and that gives me negative 1n plus 2 equals negative 1. Now I'm going to subtract my 2, negative 1n equals negative 3. Divide by negative 1, n equals positive 3. It wants to know what my larger number is. So if I look back to where I started with the n and the n plus 2, n is 3, n plus 2 is 5. So which one is the larger number? 5. So you have some like that on the practice you have to do in Google Forms. So just make sure you write out the equation and solve it correctly. Take a picture of your work for all, I think there's 12 problems. Take a picture of all your work and then upload it with your file when you turn in your Google form. All right, if you have any questions, remember I am going to be available. You can message me or you can send me an email if you get stuck on something. And just let me know what you're struggling with and I will try and do my best to help you. And I will see you guys next week. Bye, y'all.